Hey everybody, welcome to Never Too Old for YA. This week we'll be discussing chapters 16 through 20 of Karen M. McManus's novel, You'll Be the Death of Me. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Never the Number 2 Old for YA. This podcast is streaming on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Facebook, and YouTube.
Hey, Kels.
Hey, Mel.
So I've been really on you about I wanted you to like this book so bad. And then this section that we read for today's episode, I was so bored. I was so into the story. And then this particular section was I literally felt like we were stuck in one scene and that's it. It didn't even need to be broken into chapters. It was just one thing. I don't know. I was not a fan. I just really wish that we got an answer to something. I mean, I guess we did get answers to something, but not really. Go ahead. You tell them what happened this week.
So basically, Cal, Ivy, and Mateo team up with Charlie like they did last week. They're still with Charlie. And then they all decide to try to track down Autumn at her job. She's driving around sharpening knives for businesses. She is probably oblivious to everything that's been going on. So they find her and they fill her in on everything that's happened with Boney and everything and the drugs and that Charlie's house got ransacked and all of everything that went on basically in last week's section that we covered. Mateo tells her basically get mom out of town, get his mom out of town, keep her out of town because they're in danger because Mateo's on the list. So probably whoever has the list or whoever's seen the list probably knows where he lives. And so he's trying to keep his mom out of it as best he can and try to keep Autumn out of it too, even though she's the one selling the drugs. But she is really regretful of it. And she's saying, if you guys need to, in order to keep yourself safe, from being suspects or anything, just spill everything and tell them everything and take me down, it's fine. And then there's still been some romantic tension between Ivy and Mateo, but Ivy is kind of enjoying it while it lasts because she thinks that they're going to be doomed and they're never going to be together because she has something to tell him, but she hasn't really revealed what it is yet. And the last line of the last chapter we read of chapter 20, it's Ivy telling Mateo, I need to tell you something.
And that's the second time that she said that at the end of a section that we read. So let's bring it back a little bit. So in this section, Ivy, Mateo, and Cal asked Charlie, when you called this phone, you thought you were talking to Mahoney, and you asked him if he was there. Who's he? And Charlie kind of goes, well, I don't know. I have no idea who he was going to meet. All I know is that Mahoney found a buyer for the drugs that they were pushing, and he was ready to spend money on it. And Mahoney was getting money hungry and greedy. And so he went up to meet with this mysterious guy alone. And then, that's what happened. So they're trying to create a theory of exactly what happened. So then Charlie's obviously still drunk, so he doesn't really know he doesn't have a sense of urgency. And he's telling them that they had, because they were okay, so he's trying to get rid of a lot. What's a lot? And come to find out, Charlie's telling them that they have a couple $100,000 worth of pills. And they're trying to get rid of them. But Autumn was against this whole deal, and she thought it was sketch in the first place. Charlie was just kind of going along with it, and Mahoney went by himself, got himself killed. And now they're stuck on who's the guy that they were going to see? Was it the guy that they stole the drugs from? Was it the guy that, owned the studio? Because they kind of put two and two together already with Dominic. how he owned the art studio. But I want to say this. Towards the end of the section that we were reading, chapter 20, Mateo's telling Ivy like that he was doing research about Dominic. And Dominic was like in a whole bunch of debt. Like he had no money. He was on the verge of bankruptcy. And then all of a sudden, he came into so much money and he was fine. Like his financials were fine. I was like, okay, so we're onto something. We're getting there. And then the rest of the section fell flat.
Agreed. I forgot to mention that, but I'm glad you did. But yeah, it was, my eyes were closing while I was trying to read.
I'm reading a second book while reading this one. And I was finding myself reading this section and like wanting to finish like as fast as I could to read the other book. It was so uneventful. Like I wish they would have drug it on more. And I'm really like, okay, so one thing we were missing is that Autumn was like on her route, you know, with the, what is it, murder mobile?
Yeah, the murder van, where because that she sharpens knives in and like sells knives or whatever to restaurants.
Right. And so Mateo's like, oh my God, like something's gonna happen to her, like she's in trouble. If our names are on the list, like that's gotta mean something. So they try to find her and they're trying to hunt her down, but she's working and she's on her route. So Mateo calls her boss and is like, hey, but her boss goes, I can't give you any information over the phone unless I have like proof that you guys are related because, you know, obviously. And so when they go to her job and get her route information and where she's heading to next so that they can meet up with her, the guy's like, oh, you weren't the first one to call. There was some guy that called earlier too, but didn't leave his name. So I'm like, is it the same guy that killed Mahoney? And while all this is happening, like school's going crazy. Like everyone's blaming Ivy. Like Ivy's the prime suspect at school. Like obviously not police, but basically everyone at school's already like made up their minds that she did it. She fits the description and everything. I mean, I know we're saying that this section was like boring, but we did get some information out of it. Another thing I wanted to mention is that when Ivy and Mateo are waiting for Autumn's like route information, Mateo tells Ivy like, hey, I don't know what's going on, but you fit the description like perfectly. Like, what's up with that? Like, what's going on with that? So then he comes up with this theory that like, because she said she was hearing sounds, if you remember, she was hearing sounds when she was chasing Mahoney in the building. And so what happened and who saw her? Because now Mateo's thinking like, okay, someone saw her, someone's framing her, or the anonymous tip was fake and they're just like trying to frame her for some reason. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. That part was confusing to me. I think I just zoned out a lot during this section, honestly. So I feel like I didn't get everything out of it that I was supposed to get out of it. So yeah, I think my contributions are kind of crap this week. Sorry.
Also she's falling asleep. We're on Zoom and she's falling asleep. I can see her.
I'm tired. I had a long day.
So did I. But I'm still gonna read some more after this, to be honest. But yeah, I mean, there wasn't really much to talk about this week. I feel really bad because it's going to be a shorter episode, and our episode's already short, but it is what it is. We had no predictions last week, and so I mean, we can't really talk about those, but I think that I'm hoping since we're like a little more than halfway through the book, things will pick up again. But I just was so bored with this section. And I was just thinking to myself, like, should we read more? But we had already told you guys we were reading those 5 chapters. So I'm like, we can't read more. And then they're going to be like, hey, I didn't read that far for whoever's following along, but I feel like there's not much to say about this section.
I'm kind of at a loss for words too. I guess I was kind of surprised that when Autumn got caught up on like the whole situation, like they talked to her and caught her up on everything that's been going on, that she started like punching like the walls of the van and stuff. Like, I don't know, it just wasn't a reaction that I had kind of like expected from her.
I know, what the heck was that?
I don't know. And Mateo even said like, oh, I mean, not said it out loud, but like in his like narrative or whatever, said that when she first moved in, like after her parents passed away in a car accident, that like she would like punch holes in the walls, like just freaking out about stuff.
I totally forgot that, Kels.
What?
What you just said, like how she used to freak out and like be super aggressive when she was younger.
Yeah.
I completely forgot about that. I mean, honestly though, like there's really nothing to say. I feel like one, we already said it, but it fell short. I was bored. You were bored. We're bored right now because there's really nothing to say. I don't know, Kels. What do we do, honestly? Because there's just not enough.
I don't know. I feel like there's not even enough to make predictions again.
I know. I have no predictions. Like, I don't even know what the heck Ivy's even talking about that she needs to tell him something. Like, she needs to tell Mateo something. Like, tell him what?
I
I've
don't
been waiting like 5, 6 chapters for you to tell him something.
Yeah. And I'm wondering if she's gonna actually tell him in the next 5 chapters that we read, or if we're just gonna go another 5 chapters ridiculously without finding anything out of what she needs to tell him. Like, enough with the suspense already. Just say it. Just spit it out.
Oh God, I hope not. If it takes that long, I'm quitting. I'm just kidding. We can't do that, but the only other thing I can think about is how Ivy is so like she's literally the suspect right now, like to everybody. And like the police haven't gotten involved or anything. Like, no, it's just like reporters going out. That one reporter, I forget his name all the time, but that one reporter, then like the kids at her school, like she's not really like being sought out by like law enforcement or anything, but basically she's getting her name dragged through the mud, and she still has like this fear that she's gonna ruin this for her mom, like because we're still within the same day, guys. Like so much has happened and we're still within the same day, and it's only like 3 o'clock, and they left school at like what, 8?
Yeah, even the timeline is dragging for me. Like, I was thinking in my head until they actually said that it was 3. I was thinking it was like 5 or 6 already.
Same. And so like Ivy's still thinking about like her mom's award and what's gonna happen after that, because her mom and dad haven't arrived yet. And she hasn't even started getting ready for the event. And then like, okay, so the reporters at her school and everyone's trying to like ask her brother, like, hey, what do you think about your sister and all this going on? And he's not even backing her up or anything. Her best friend Emily's the one trying to stick up for her, even though she hasn't talked to her all day. She's like, no, Ivy could not have done this. Like, I don't know. This section was kind of like all over the place. I feel like it was like a starting point. It was like a buffer into the next like roller coaster ride.
Yeah, I agree. I think so too. I just really hope that the next section, the next 5 chapters we're gonna read, picks up, because it's gonna be another drag if not.
Yeah, I know. So really no predictions this week for me. All I'm really hoping for is that we find out who this person is and what the heck Ivy's hiding. Those are the only two questions. But let me ask you this. Having read up till now, has anything changed in your prediction of who done it?
A little bit. I'm starting to suspect Dominic.
Okay, and why?
It's his studio, for one thing. And now they found out that he was really broke and like was having really hard times financially, and then came into a bunch of money like really quickly and was fine again. Usually when people come into money like that quickly, it's usually attached to drugs. So like that's kind of why I'm suspecting him. I think Laura's in on it probably, and that's probably where the list came from. But then Charlie also said something about some guy named the Weasel or something that they call the Weasel. Like he's kind of like an urban legend, sort of. Like Charlie's not even sure if he exists or if it's just some like story that he's heard. But basically, he's like a kingpin of like a drug dealer that like eliminates competition, because he said that a lot of times anybody at Carlton High who's like tried to have like a drug business and sold drugs, like the buyers wouldn't show up, or like, like they just wouldn't get any customers or whatever. And he thinks that there's somebody higher up taking out the competition. So it could have been that. It could have been whoever they stole the drugs from going and trying to buy it back or steal it back, I guess, offering to buy it, and then when they got there, trying to like just take it back without paying or whatever, because why are you going to pay for something that got stolen from you? And that would make sense why Charlie's house got ransacked, because they realized that, oh crap, all of the drugs that got stolen aren't here. This is only part of it. And then they're trying to find the rest of it. So that would make sense to me anyway. So it could be whoever they stole the drugs from also. So probably Dominic or whoever they stole the drugs from.
I want to go back on my prediction as well. I feel like Dominic's the obvious choice, right? Which makes me a little skeptical that it could be him. Does she want us to think it is? I don't know. But I'm going to take back that Coach has nothing to do with this. But it's hurting my gut, so I don't know if I honestly don't know. But at this moment in time, I'm thinking that Laura saw her really good friend in trouble. And he knew who had stole it from her. I'm sorry. Okay, so Laura knew her friend was in trouble. He was already selling drugs. He was already doing this to get all that money. Because you're right. Like, that's a lot of money to come into. To save like a whole building, like that's a lot. And so I think that he knew who had stole it from him. And the only way that he could find out more about these people was if Laura had given him the roster. And then from there, I think that he or whoever set up Mahoney for him to be there, knowing that Charlie was going to be at school. Ivy had nothing to do with it, and Autumn was already working her own job. And I think that while they were distracting Mahoney, someone went and ransacked Charlie's house. Honestly, I don't know what's going on anymore. I feel like Dominic is just too on the nose right now, and I think she's trying to throw us off, because I really don't want that to be that. I really don't want this book to be that predictable. I'll be so disappointed if it's Dominic.
I probably would too, but I don't know. Like a lot of mysteries I've read, like I get about halfway through the book and I can already predict how it ends, and I'm right. So I don't know. That's kind of what wears on me about mysteries, is that they get kind of too predictable after a while, after you've read enough of them.
Well, sorry guys, this was uneventful, but we hope that next week's episode's a little more thrilling, I guess. But yeah, this is the end of this episode. I'm so annoyed that it went down like this. Like, I'm so irritated by it. Thanks everybody for listening to this week's episode of Never Too Old for YA. Next week, we'll be reading chapters 21 through 25. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Never2 Old for YA. And we're streaming on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Facebook, iHeartRadio, and YouTube. Until next time, bye!